Hello, this interview is one in a series of interviews that the Special Collections section of the State Archives of North Carolina is conducting with the American Indian Heritage Commission to record the lived experience of indigenous communities in North Carolina. These oral histories will be part of an archives series and will be available to the public. Today is Monday, July 1st, 2024. This is an interview with Mrs. Geraldine Jacobs Clark. The interview is being conducted for the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project, and the interviewer is Curry Bird, Director, North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission. This video interview is being conducted in person at the home of Mrs. Geraldine Jacobs Clark at 480 University Road, Pembroke, North Carolina. State your name
Geraldine Clark.
and spell that for us.
Geraldine Clark. I didn't put the Jacobs in there.
That's good. All right, we'll start with this. A very easy question for you.
Okay.
What is your birthday and place of birth?
My place of birth is Robeson County, North Carolina, and my birth date is January 7th, 1934.
Great. So tell me about yourself, Miss Clark.
Oh, well, there's a bunch and there's a little. So I'll just start maybe with my parents.
Okay.
My dad is Edmund Jacobs, and my mother was Mary Lowry Jacobs. And they were, I don't know when they got married, but it was a long, long time ago. However, he was a big farmer. We lived near, maybe about 3 miles from Magnolia, in the Magnolia section, and we farmed a lot of land. And I just remember, how my brothers, I had 6 brothers and 6 sisters, so they worked hard, but I don't know whether I was blessed or cursed. However, I was sick. I had a fever, a rheumatic fever, so I couldn't be out in the sun. So I didn't have to work out in the field, and along with my other brothers and sisters, and so I got the chance to go to school. And lots of times, I don't know why I didn't get up earlier, but anyway, the bus would leave me. So I'd ride my bicycle. And so I got used to that. I'd ride the bicycle to school. And I just felt so good about being able to go. But now I didn't get to go until I was 8 years old. I wasn't able to go to school until I was 8. And so I was back, behind the people that I should have been along with. So 2 of the teachers, Miss Vernie Hunt and Miss Tessie Hunt, they would come to the house and tutor me. And so when I did get to start school, I was ahead of the class that I should have been with. So I sort of moved along pretty fast in elementary school. Had a wonderful, wonderful elementary grades because I got to be it was called operettas. Nobody knew about that except people back then. But it would be a play that they would have every year. And I would always get the leading part, which made me feel important, I want to say. Maybe the old saying is it gave me the big head. But however, it helped me to be able to speak. And I knew it also helped me to know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And that I think was a highlight for my life in elementary grades. And 2, my dad, he would sell tobacco when, they'd cure it and have it ready for the salesmen to come in and buy it. So he would take me with him to the where they would buy the tobacco, and I would talk to the buyers, and he'd get a bigger price on his back. It would be in baskets. But anyway, I guess they were just enthused to see me, a little child out there talking as I did. But those operators is what helped me to do that. And it also helped me to be able to converse with people. And I enjoyed my family. It was a large family. We didn't have a whole lot, but we grew everything that we had to eat except the coffee and rice. That's all my parents had to buy because they grew everything else. But it was a wonderful, wonderful to me early life. Even though as I got better from that sickness, and it was a strange thing because all of my sisters and brothers, not a one of them got sick except me. Um,
So you did your parents go to school?
no, my dad couldn't read, so he let me. When I got old enough and knew enough, I would do his books, and that's how my dad got out of debt. He was in debt to. They called it well, it was sort of like a trading company. He was a tenant farmer, and he would have to get his materials at the beginning of the year, when it would be planting time. He would have to get his materials and everything, but he'd get it on credit. Well, he never would be in this when he would house the tobacco and sell cotton. Um, he would never get out of debt, and that just sort of seemed strange to me. So when I got where I was old enough to be able to calculate and count and add and subtract, I started keeping his books. And that was the only time, the first time that he really got out of debt, was because I had it all written down, where what they had charged and what was due, that he was due to pay. And so that to me was helpful. And I think that it really enthused my parents, because none of my other sisters and brothers wanted to go to school, but I wanted to go so badly, and they did everything possible for me to be able to go to school. And another interesting thing about school, um, and my mother didn't have, she could read and she could spell and she could write a little bit, but she couldn't. She could not. There was just no way that she could, calculate numbers of any size. And so, but my mother was from South Carolina. She was not from here. Um, so anyway, she was a very good mother. But I wanted to also tell you about school. Um, when I got to the 11th grade, the juniors would have to provide the monies for the seniors' prom. And Mr. Marvin Howington from here in Pembroke, he was our sponsor. And so, of course, we didn't have any money. I mean, most of the students didn't have money. And so I can keep going. And so what we would do, we'd get out and in his he would have 2 hour. We'd have 2 hour classes with him. So we would get out there and pick cotton, and then we'd sell that cotton, and that's how we paid for the senior prom. And it was just unbelievable. But he would get out there right along with us, pick that cotton, and he would see to it that it was, that they would sell it, and that's how we made the money. And then when we became seniors, um, the seniors just went all out. I mean, the juniors below us. We had it was called a Hawaiian party, and it was just amazed me. Our parents had to. Well, my sister could sew, so she made my outfit. But it was just really, and that's how I got to know something about Hawaii, because of the prom. And then only during the year, as school was going on, and this was junior, senior, and maybe the eighth, ninth grade, we would get out and have bonfires, because the farmers would pile up their trash and like stumps, or not stumps, but where that they had cut some timber, and it was sort of like trash, and we would get out there and burn it at night and cook hot dogs and hamburgers. That would be the junior, seniors, and the ninth graders. So it was just really, we had a good time in high school. It was not as, maybe not as busy as some of the schools are today, but it was really, we were learning the whole time we were learning, but we were also enjoying it. Then we would get to come to the university, which was like going to Washington now. We'd come in every spring. We would come in and do activities of different sorts, like we'd have basketball, running. I got the award for running. I was the fastest runner. Can you believe that? That was just so unbelievable. But we had like a 10-acre farm, and instead, most of my brothers and sisters would ride their horses back to the 10-acre farm. Well, I would run because it was good for my lungs, and I outran everybody in Robeson County that went to that program at here at Pembroke. But I still have my award. I got a real nice little pin, but it means a lot to me. So that was another highlight of my life. And then just being around, and I thought Pembroke was the capital. So when I would come to Pembroke, I'd be at the capital of the United States. That now I was naive, but I was also proud. I was so proud to be able to get to come to Pembroke. We would save up our money. The girls would. They'd save up their monies in order for the guys to buy gas to drive us to Pembroke on Sunday. And I guess that's maybe where that just driving around on the street, that's all we would do. It didn't stop or anything. We just wanted to see what it was like. We thought we were going, far out. We were sheltered. Our my life was sheltered a whole lot. So, but it seemed like seemingly it paid off.
Now, where were you in the lineup of the 13 kids?
The seventh, the seventh, yes. I don't know whether that was good or bad. Um, some of them were some of them were very protective of me, and some of them were not. I mean, they would push me around, but I was the seventh one.
Did any of them go to school at all?
No, no. Well, my sister. I went to one of my sisters finished high school, but the rest of them, as soon as they got old enough, they got married, and my brothers were never interested in school, but each one of them got an excellent job, and they learned on the job, and they really made a good living. How not they didn't not educational wise, but they did learn as they worked the jobs that they had. So
And what about your clothes? Did your mom make your clothes, or did you buy them
no,
yourself?
I was so fortunate. The the guy, the man that we call him the overseer for the farmers. He had a daughter the same size and same age as me, and they must have had plenty of money. And they would just he would bring all of her clothes to me. But now my sisters, my older sisters, or larger ones or smaller ones, we would when we get flour, it would be in beautiful sacks. My sister was a very good seamstress, and she made all of their clothes out of those flour sacks. But they were beautiful. Um, but I was so happy that I didn't have to wear them because I knew everybody else knew what it was because everybody was wearing flour sacks. We all were sort of like you might say in the same category. There was no rich or really, really poor either.
So, what was it like growing up here in Robeson County? As far as the community, did you go to a doctor's office? Did you grocery store?
Well, as I said, we didn't have to go to the grocery store. Well, we'd get ice cream. My dad would bring us some ice cream, and we'd get pepper stick candy. Christmas mostly is when we get fruits. Um, yeah, no, well, actually, I did have to go to the doctor, but I don't recall. I don't recall any distinction or anything, but it was called Thompson's Hospital, I think. And I got in an accident, car accident, when I was 15. And so I stayed in the hospital 18 days at Thompson's. It's either Thomas or Thompson's, but it's still down there in Lumberton. And I didn't, you know, since then, and since I left Lumberton, I heard people talk about so many prejudices down there. Um, but we moved to Lumberton after I guess I must have been in maybe the ninth grade when we moved to Lumberton. And it was called the Roland Farm. And most of the people there, my mother had 6 children. Well, my dad died right after we moved there. And if it had not been for a lot of those people around there, some of the doctors that lived on the street where our farm was located, I could never have gone to college because my mother didn't have the money, and there was no way she could borrow it. And as far as scholarships was concerned, there was no such thing. So they helped me a lot. I mean, helped my mother and helped me to go to school. So that's when I started to college. I'm speaking about, but we didn't move there until I had to be at least 14 or 15 when we moved to Lumberton.
What about movie theaters?
Yeah, they had Riverside. I think it was Riverside in Carolina. But you know what? Now I was told. I mean, I heard them say it that the Indians, they had a place for the Indians to go in, the blacks to go in, and the whites, and if 3 doors. And they also had 3 fountains at the fire station where you drink water. If you wanted to use the restroom or if you wanted to get water, you had to use the fountain that was marked for Indian, Indian, or you weren't supposed to drink it from anywhere else. And you had to go in the restroom that was identified as such. So I absolutely knew I was not going to go in a designated. I mean, I didn't mind. I was proud to be an Indian. I just wasn't going to let people tell me that I could go. I couldn't go. I couldn't go in this one or I couldn't go in that one. So I just refused to go.
What about restaurants? Did you ever go out to a restaurant?
The only one would be it was the old foundry. That's the only one I can remember. But they pretty much had everything. And trying to recall once we moved to Lumberton, I just don't remember. Maybe they had them. Maybe we couldn't afford to go. I don't know. We just did. I didn't ever go.
Tell me a little bit about Old Foundry.
Well, it was a meeting place. That's where a lot of couples would go there. It was a really nice place, but it was run by all Indians. And as far as if there was ever any kind of disturbances there, and I don't think anybody was allowed to go there to drink. So it was really a nice place, from my estimation.
So you mentioned your parents. What was the most valuable lesson you learned from your parents?
To work hard and to be honest and be faithful. I got saved when I was 13, and Well, I wandered away easily once I got into high school, but I came back. However, those were the I would say those were the things because we would spend no matter what would come or what we had to do, we would spend a week in church. That was all day. We'd carry our food and we'd stay at church all day, even and right on into night sometime. Um, and my parents were pretty. My mother was pretty sturdy as far as her faith was believed, but my dad was not. He was sort of wavered, you know. He just was a Christian one day, and the next day he might not be. As according to what if he was selling tobacco and getting with the people that that all those people that would sell tobacco. He would just do a few things that was just not church material. But they really taught us. But now we had to work. I mean, my brothers and sisters. However, we were taught to be honest, just hardworking, honest, faithful people.
So let's talk about your siblings. We can talk about them one at a time. We can talk about them as a group. But I noticed you had you said 6 brothers.
6 brothers.
Uh, Johnson, Martin, James, Marshall, Bobby, and Billy.
That's right.
Um, and one was called Boot and one was called Pete.
Yes, that was Marcia and uh, Martin. Boot was Martin.
And what about your sisters? Magdalene,
Yes,
Eula May, Betty Lois, Mary Lee, Maggie, and Peggy.
yes, and they're all gone. My Magdalene, she passed away back in January. We had the same birthday, January the 7th, and she died January the 7th this past January. And they were my sister Euler. She looked after me, and my sister Betty, which we call her Money, she looked after Merle because they were older than us. There was like 6 younger ones, and then those 7 older ones. That was girls and boys, and they each were assigned one of the younger ones to watch over them. Wherever if we went someplace or if we were working or whatever. Um, so so Euler was mine, and she was the first one to get married, and I sort of was left on my own. Maggie and Peggy was the baby. But the rest of them, they just didn't. They were not too keen on taking care of anybody. So it was just a matter of growing up and watching, observing. We had to. I observed my sisters to see what they were doing, so I'd know what to do when I came along. But I didn't have but one. Well, actually, Peggy and Magdalene were below me, so I didn't have too much of a problem to try to keep them in line. The only thing I hated cooking, I couldn't cook. I'd burn it, or eitherwise the water would cook out of it. I just didn't pay it any attention, and I didn't want to do it. So I was not very honest with cooking. But the rest of my sisters, #1 cooks, every one of them.
So how have you modeled any of this in raising your own kids?
I've tried to teach them to be honest, um, and to also work hard. Not shirk their duties. They each had duties and responsibilities, and I tried to instill in them that those virtues were very important. And most of them have. In fact, they were talking last night about that, and And I was saying, we were talking about somebody that they knew that was wayward, sort of. And I said, well, how in the world can their parents allow that? And Marco speaks up and he said, well, you allowed it with Cal. I said, oh, no, I didn't. Our children, they had a curfew. They had to be home at a certain time. If they were not, they had to suffer the consequence. But Cal, he was just a little bit wayward because he went someplace. He just started courting, and he went off with one of his friends, and we told him to be home by 11 o'clock. That was the curfew. Well, 11 o'clock came, no cow. 12 o'clock came, no cow. And I told Bartow, I said, I am going to, I said, we going to have, I said, get up. He was in the bed. I said, get out of that bed. We're going to go find him. He said, well, we wouldn't know where to go find him. I said, well, I'm going to go to the police station and see if they could find him. No, he said he thought I was crazy. But anyway, I did call the cops. But Cal, what had happened, he'd gone up above Laurinburg, and he went with his friend out to see his friend's girlfriend, and she lived in some must have lived in a place where it was real muddy. They got stuck, and he couldn't get home. But now let me tell you, I was so scared, but I didn't have another one of my children that would stay out when they knew what time they were supposed to be home. I'm so glad, because that's scary for any parent.
So, before we get on to your husband and family, um, what was it like attending school? Was it segregated, or was it what was what
You
was your
mean
class makeup?
you mean at elementary and high
Yeah,
school? Oh, it was it's just predominantly Indian, nobody else.
in high school was fine.
Yes. Well, I would say it was fine, but we may not have been exposed to all the things that we should have been. We had music, limited, um, different things that I saw that some of the college students had when I started to college that I had not been exposed to. And so I knew that it was, the different high schools, and or at least they got exposure that we didn't. And we had a lot of white teachers. I don't know whether there was not many Indian teachers qualified, or I think that could have had a lot to do with it. But I'd say over maybe three-fourths of our teachers were white. I think as soon as an Indian got qualified, I think they got. But the board would be the one to hire them. So I don't. I hate to think in these terms, but the truth is welcome. Um, I think the board, and I know the board was all white. So if there was a white person that came up that needed a job, they got the position regardless as to whether somebody else was qualified or not.
So, so who was your favorite teacher?
Miss Minnie Hammonds. She was my second grade teacher. I didn't get to stay with her that long. She's the one who influenced me to become a teacher. She was not flashy. She was not she dressed just like most of the people did. Um, but the thing is, the one thing about her that I sort of hesitate in telling, she used snuff, and my daddy used snuff, and she she would keep that spit can right at her desk, and I was just so amazed. I thought she was the most amazing teacher, but she was very colorful. She would demonstrate anything, if it was a poem or a story, and we didn't have a lot of books, and our books had been used 5 years. When we would get those books, they had already been used 5 years. So she would, if we all didn't get a book, she would demonstrate whatever the lesson was about, or she would read it out loud so that everybody would have the same exposure at the same time. And she would demonstrate, no matter what the story was about, what was it, Brer Rabbit or something, and she would take students, have students to get up, and perform. As she was the most delightful teacher that I and then out of high school, Mr. Carl Jr., who is your uncle, he is your uncle. He was my he was my precious high school teacher. He was a genuine teacher. And he was so delightful. He was calm. He was easy. He didn't ever get upset with anybody. And he would make sure that you understood whatever the he wanted you to get or glean from that lesson. He made sure you had it. And it was not, every student don't learn at the same rate or same time or as easily. But he made sure that even the slowest person in that class got that concept. And that to me, now when I look back in my teaching, some of my teaching, I use some of the same thoughts that I think that he had. Because, and some Miss Minnie had too. They really influenced me. And I knew I was going to be a teacher. I just knew I was. Even down in Miss Minnie's room, I knew it. But Mr. Carl Jr. just sort of tacked it down.
So were you expected to go to college, or is that just a personal choice?
Oh no! I knew I was going to go to college. I mean, I didn't know how, and I didn't have the means, and I didn't know, like they gave out some scholarships, but you had to be in the know. You had to be one of the people on the person's list that made out the scholarship list. And I weren't, and not many people from Magnolia were. These outlying schools, they didn't get as good an opportunity, as some of the others. So, but hey, I got 25 cents a day. That's how much money I got to come to college. We had I think it was a Plymouth car, and my mother, she would check the mileage every morning. She'd check that mileage every afternoon, and she'd give me that 25 cents to. That's what I'd have to eat. I'd get me a RC Cola, Butterfinger, and a bologna sandwich with lettuce and tomato. Now I could get all of that for 25 cents. I didn't have any money to put gas in. She'd keep the gas, but she made sure I didn't use any extra.
So tell me about your husband. How did y'all meet? Tell
You
me
uh,
his name and how did y'all
you'll never believe this. I we I worked with, as I told you, I was at Magnolia. Well, he was teaching the 8th grade at Magnolia. So in order for me to get lunch, I could sign up to work in the cafeteria for an hour every day. And that's what I did. So I was a server in the cafeteria, and Berto would come by every day. He'd come by with his 8th graders, and he I'd make sure that I gave him a little extra of whatever that he liked, and he would say something. He was really really quiet, but he would say something. Well, I'd always say something back, and so finally he asked me. I think I was in the 12th grade. Yeah, I was, and he asked me if I dated, and I said no, no. But that was a story. Anyway, he asked me for a date, but he was dating a teacher there, a teacher at the school at the time, and I was she was one of the ones who had tutored me when I was down in the sick, and I had a whole lot of respect for her, And so I didn't want to date him due to the fact, of her kindness and generosities. And but anyway, he said, "Well, she's not, she didn't mean anything to him." So his cousin was dating my sister, so he came with his cousin to see my sister, and my mother let us. I think we went to a movie. So that's how it got started. But and that was like in September, and then by February he had asked me to marry him, which I didn't want to. I got married right out of high school, and I really didn't want to get married. I wanted to come to college, but I knew that was a plan in order to get me into college, and that's how it happened. But I tell you, I had a good life with him. 62 years we lived together. I mean, we were married, but he was, he was, I guess he just, the old saying is, he fell in love. I learned to love, if you've ever heard of such. Because I didn't know what that, I mean, I really had never had any, I had never even really dated that much. Um, so I didn't know, what how I was supposed to feel. But his kindness and his gentleness and his understanding, I just learned to care.
And y'all had 4 kids?
4. Yeah, Marco. Marco was, we got married in 1950. I graduated in 53. And we got married in February of 54. And so I started to college that September prior to my getting married. And anyway, we got married. Marco was born in 1955. So I went to college for a year, maybe not quite a year, and then I stayed out because I didn't ever feel comfortable going when I was expecting, and I stayed out with Marco. And then Tina came along in 1958, and I stayed out with her. Then I started back. It was in and out, in and out. But I said I was determined that I was going to finish college. And so then 59, Cal came along. But in between there, I had gone to school maybe a semester. And Tona was 1961. But in the meantime, while when Marco was a baby, we went to Pennsylvania for the summer. I thought we were going up there to stay a while because I had a brother that lived there. So we went there, and Bartow was offered a wonderful job, and I thought he was going to take that job, but I had just learned to drive well, and we bought a new car before we went to Philadelphia, and I was going somewhere there and the trolleys, they were on that track. Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I thought they could, I don't know what I thought. Anyway, I pulled up, it was turning, and I pulled up, and that trolley came around, and I was hollering, "Stop, stop!" And it crushed that car. And so right then and there, I said, I want to go home. I said, I don't want to stay here. So we came back, and that's when he started being the principal at Chapel. And he was principal there, I believe, for about 6 years. And so after Cal was born, he was born in 1959, and I commute back to school. And Tona, she was born in 1961, March of 1961. So Tona, after Tona, then I finally finished college. But Lindy Martin, you wouldn't know him, or you might have known Miss Murray Bell or Martin for. Well, anyway, they were having something. It was called Masters. It was principals. They'd have a dinner every once a month, and so I went with her to one night when they were having that dinner. And Mary's brother Lindy, he gets up. He had, I guess he was the master of ceremonies. But anyway, he gets up and he starts, talking about different people. He said, "Now you take that Geraldine sitting over there." Said it took her 10 years to finish college. Well, I was in and out of college. I was out, I'd go in when I was not pregnant, then I'd go back. And Lindy, he was doing it as a joke or just, how people would get up and talk at a place like that. I said, I got right up. I weren't supposed to speak. I wasn't even supposed to open my mouth, but I got up right behind him. I said, "Yes, it took me 10 years, but I said, I've got 4 diplomas and 4 degrees to show where I was at those 10 years. I said, Lindy, how many do you have?" And I thought that audience would roll because he was constantly, he would do that almost. He was, he was really a wonderful person, but he just liked to put people on the spot or otherwise, you know, say something about them. But they told me that, they said nobody's supposed to speak except the speaker. I knew I weren't letting him get away with that. I just couldn't. I could not. But it was after that, it seemingly I didn't have such a bad time, but it was hard, going in and out, in and out. Because each time I'd go back, they'd be changed the curriculum. And I'd have to take all these courses that other people didn't have to take due to the fact they had changed the curriculum. So it was hard. But now I had some wonderful professors who helped me a lot. A Dr. Martin and a Dr. Well, I knew Miss Dr. West, and there were several of those people helped me so much. But I learned. I reckon the old saying is I learned a lot because I had to keep picking up all that the other people didn't get. But anyway, it was nice. I got through it, and I finished. I finally finished in 1973. Yeah, 1973 is when I graduated, and I started in 19. Well, actually, it would have been 1955 or 54, but not. It was just semesters at the time or something like that. Sometimes I didn't even get to go a whole semester. But I'm sure I believe it was 1963 that I finished college. I mean 1960. It had to be 63 because I graduated in 53 from high school.
So after you received what was your undergrad degree in?
I had a elementary and a grammar, the four for K through 3 and K through 6. I mean K through 4, K through 3, and then K through 6. And I taught at Green Grove for 2 years, and there I taught the 4th and 5th grade. That was high. They wanted me to teach out here at the junior high, and Mr. Young was going to try. In fact, he was about to force me. Well, no, I told him I'd quit before I'd do that. But he wanted me to teach the 7th grade, and I was qualified, and they said they didn't have a teacher at that time that was qualified. I told him I'd quit because I had taught 5th grade, and it was nothing like fourth. I mean fifth. Well, third. I taught third too. So I didn't want to go above 3rd grade. And then when second integration started, I was there when that came about. So I was one of the people to go around to the different schools and different areas to talk with people about integration and Mr. Young Allen, he was the superintendent at that time. He was going to send me to Tanglewood, and he said they had to have a they they didn't need a white and they didn't need a black. They needed an Indian. So he said he was going to send me to Tanglewood. I said, Mr. Allen, I said, I didn't go to school to teach white or black. I said, I went to school to teach Indian. And I said, that's who I'm going to teach or nobody. Well, I can get rid. I said, well, you go right ahead. You get rid of me because I said, I'm not going. And I was determined. I was so determined. It's a wonder I hadn't got fired. I mean, there were so many things I have, when I look back, that I would do defiant. But it was not defiant for me. It was defiant for the children or the community. And so I reckon he decided to leave me in the Indian schools. But I did agree to be a person to go around and talk with the people about integration because I thought that was right. I just really thought it was right. I never thought that any child should be, because of the color of their skin, should be pushed aside. And so,
Now, did you ever receive a master's?
did I do what?
Did you ever receive a master's degree?
No, I could have, but I didn't. I went to Greensboro to school some and correspondence, but I didn't. I just felt like I just couldn't go to school any longer. I mean, I after staying out and starting back, I just felt like I couldn't do it. I wanted to be in the classroom. I didn't want to spend my time. And I also saw, I tell you what I saw. I saw teachers that were pursuing their higher degree. I also saw those that wanted the master's degree in certain things. And some of the children were the ones they were pushed aside. I mean, well, hey, those people were paying for that, and they were having to be studying and be prepared. And I saw a lot of children given busy work for the teachers to do their work for those degrees, and I just didn't see where that I thought that it would make me any better teacher. Now that's not a good reason. Now I know it's not, but that's how I felt.
Tell me about your teaching career. So, how long did you teach?
Oh, 43 years. Those were the most blessed years of my life. I've enjoyed my family and enjoyed church and enjoyed the community, but I got the best education that I have ever could have ever gotten, and I didn't get it. I did not get it from books. I got it from children because they will teach you if you just listen and observe. Every day, I never had a child that I can recall that didn't teach me something, and you were one of them. You were just absolutely excellent. You brought with you the knowledge, and you put it in me. But this one little boy, and that's an experience that I cherish. But I also feel that I didn't do my duty or didn't do as much as I could have. It was at Pembroke Elementary out here before the old school. I was at the old school. And I think it was it may have been the first year of kindergarten. And they had this little boy, and I can remember who they told me the child was, but anyway, he was, he was in the kindergarten class. I had first grade, but he was in kindergarten, but the teacher couldn't handle him. And so she went to Mr. Dial and told him she'd have to quit because she couldn't teach that child. And so he put the child in my room. Well, the first day, The child couldn't speak. All he could do was bark. He just barked like a dog. I mean, it was exactly like a dog. Didn't know his name. He didn't know anything. So I talked to Mr. Dial. I said, Mr. Dial, there is something wrong with that child. I said, I don't know what to do. I said, he's barking instead of talking. And Mr. Dial said, well, just let me look into it. And come to find out, that child, the parents, I guess they had been busy. They were busy. I don't know. All I know, they said that the parents had been tying that child at a tree with the dog from the time he was, I guess, a child that was crawling. And he had never been around anybody, people or children talking. And so anyway, after when I found that out, then I started, I just give him a word, just one word at a time. And before he left that classroom that night, end of the 9 months or 10 months, um, he had got where he couldn't read, but he could talk. He could talk, just say a few words. He could communicate. So I felt like that. I just felt like that was such a blessing to me. To me, that was a big blessing because that was the most pitiful situation. That one situation, and a little boy that he'd come in, he'd go right straight over and get in on the floor and go to sleep. And I said, there's something wrong with that child. So come to find out, he weren't getting any sleep at night. And so I got him a little pillow. And I said, now come here. I said, when you come in, you get that pillow and you go there and you sleep till you wake up. And then you got to start studying. And when Mr. Dow checked on it, that little fella had been sleeping in the room, in the bed with 5 adults. Eh, you know, just things like that. I mean, that was such a experience. But out of those 43 years of teaching, I had some, and Rex Rent was, oh Lord, that was something else. But those children had never had any kind of education. Didn't even have a school, and they finally got a school up there. And the parents couldn't drive them all the way to Pembroke to every morning and come back and pick them up here. So they had no school and couldn't go to the Red Springs. And whatever the other schools were up there, it was either white or black, and they were out. They had no school. So when I went there right after they built that school, and I'm telling you, there were some smart children. They didn't know. You just used the basics to get them started. Once they got started and got a taste of learning, they were on fire. Carol, I think her name's Carol. Well, she would be a Mitchell now, but it was Carol Locklear then. She she was one of my students, and she was the head. The last time I talked with her, she was the head of that up there at Cape Fear, the nursing. And you mentioned somebody in there a while ago that went to school up there. That who in the world? No, she's something to do. I remember you telling me, but she's something to do with the Indian education. But anyhow, she was a student from up there. She was just some really smart children. Now, Pembroke Elementary children had a much, much better background. And of course, it didn't take as long for them you know, to become very active and also showing what they knew. And they were very bold. When I say bold, I'm talking about if they had to read, they'd read. Or if they had to speak, they'd speak. But if children didn't even have vocabularies to speak, it would take them a little bit longer to catch on, but once they caught on. But now I'm telling you now, my years of teaching was just absolutely just a highlight. My family, Well, you can't replace a family, but there's just not have been anything else that highlighted my life. And I must have loved it because I'd come home in the afternoon and tutor until 7 o'clock every day that I taught school. And since I retired, I've been tutoring, but I quit last year.
Did you have any other involvement with education besides teaching, as far as local activities, statewide, nationally?
I did have a run with teaching reading. The Ginn series, they they offered me a contract, but I didn't take it because I didn't want to leave. I'd have had to have left home, left my children, and I would have had to have left the school. So I turned it down. But as far as my having experience, it was more like, communicating to them. They'd communicate to me and I'd communicate back to them. But as far as my going, I did go to school, as I said, at Greensboro for, uh, I guess maybe 2 semesters. But it was not a Pembroke. It was not Pembroke University. Of course, that was Pembroke State when I was there, and I was there when it integrated.
What was that like?
Mm, it was wonderful. It had some. It took some time to get used to it because we had to watch our mouths. We'd say things that maybe would offend somebody, or they'd say something that would offend us, and we'd have to call their hand on it. Um, but once we got started and saw that we were all human beings, it worked out fine. And I think it's been a good thing for the university. I just don't. I don't know what the degree is about our Indian students, why I knew a part of it, why that we don't have more Indian students out here. Um, but at the time that I went out there to investigate, I was very upset. Um, the person that was in charge of giving out scholarships, she didn't even listen to, read, digest, or anything else. The students, the Indian students, when they would turn in applications about needing help, um, she would help white students. And I don't know about, there weren't that many black students when I went and talked with her at that time, but now it's a lot. But she absolutely, any white student that came along, they got help. And we had students that were, I'm talking about very, very intelligent, but she would not. No way. And I couldn't believe it because I had I had stayed over after school with both of her boys and stayed there to help them because they were behind and got them caught up. And then when my daughter was Tona, when she was trying to go to school, and she had got married and things didn't work out, so and she was having it pretty rough. Well, we could help her, but she didn't feel comfortable with us helping her. But that guidance counselor would not help her at all, and I had tutored her boys for 2 or 3 years. So I was very, very upset, and I didn't hold back. I just let her know how I felt. But that same thing's been going on now. She's not, I don't think she's out there now. I don't think so. But I was told by several Indian students that they could not get any help because they said that they were the majority. How can they be the majority? That's impossible. Even though